Good evening, everyone. Welcome here. Thanks for being with us for another inner hour tonight. Um, Tonight's going to be a little different. We're starting a new series. I'll explain that in a few moments, but welcome. And I like to light a candle, although you won't actually be able to see it in and I can hold it up when I light it, but otherwise you won't see it the rest of the evening. But uh, I like to light a candle for myself as a symbol of the light that we're working with and as a reminder to keep looking within myself and you for that light. So, yeah. If you haven't done so, give yourself a couple moments to just pause and let go of the day and the week and any stressors of connected with all that. Just relax in spirit and be present here for the next hour. So there's my I have a little taper candle. Actually, kind of a big taper candle, but here it is. So, mm. So most of you, many of you have been around for a long time, and the participation, varies from week to week. Sometimes we have a couple dozen people, sometimes a few, and sometimes lots. But what I've been doing the last while with this particular series is taking topics like some of the most recent ones we've done was about the Essenes, which was a Jewish group back in the time of Jesus, and we've done some about the women in his ministry. We've done a number of things like that. So and oftentimes it's just not a series. Didn't used to be a series. It would just do whatever I was inspired to talk about that night. I would do that, and usually, hopefully anyway, they were sort of inspirational, just uplifting general spirituality sorts of things. So, um, and usually we don't talk much about anything in the world because part of the idea of Inner Hour when I started, this was back in the first, remember the 2 week long COVID lockdown that ended up being 2 years. Um, well, I started it during that time because people couldn't get together and we did lots and lots of live events in those days and we couldn't do any. So I started Inner Hour as a way to let people connect and also do something a little bit uplifting and encouraging in a kind of difficult time for many people. So that's what we did, and it's evolved since then. So tonight I'm starting a kind of a different series that is on the nature of good and evil, and not something that we usually talk about because typically we talk about all the stuff we like to hear. We talk about the oneness of God or spiritual things or healing or peace or something that um, refocuses us into the core of our being, into the place where that divine spirit really does dwell in us and where we really do find peace and connection. We all have different understandings of what the divine is and different ways to refer to it. So if I use a word like God or divine or something else that doesn't fit you really well, then just translate it, in your head and use the word that fits you better. Um, the the nature of good and evil is something that is talked about in all the scriptures, sacred scriptures of the world with which I'm familiar. And it's not something that I usually talk about much because once you add the evil side of that component, things get pretty uncomfortable and people don't want to think about it, or they get really like um, way too far involved and that sort of thing. So hopefully this will be a balanced thing tonight, but I feel like it's an important topic right now because the fact is, no matter how much we want to just focus on the spiritual essence of things and try to not be disturbed by many things we see going around us in the world right now. The fact is, we are just most of us anyway are disturbed by those. There's a lot of pretty awful things going on. And so one of the questions we always get is what, why? If there really is such a thing as God and God is good and God cares about us, then why? Why do these horrible things happen? Not just now, but throughout history. The Holocaust is always a big one people bring up. Several people who are either agnostic or atheists that I've talked to, um, one of the questions is always, well, how can you believe in a loving God? I mean, look at the world. How can you possibly believe in that? So, and and those are perennially difficult questions for people to answer. We all come up with some way of dealing with those kind of things in ourselves. Those of us who are spiritually inclined, which all of you are, you wouldn't be in this kind of a program tonight. So we're oriented that way, and and there's a lot of difficult things that we have to contend with in our personal lives and in the life of the world at large, and somehow reconcile those within ourselves in terms of how we look at the world, and our philosophy and how we understand it. So, so I want to say just a couple of very brief things, and then I want to ask you a question and kind of open it up. So you're welcome to comment, and I hope you do comment tonight or ask questions um, when we get to that point. But if you want to make a comment or ask a question and don't want your camera on this evening for whatever reason that may be, you're having a bad hair day, or you're in your pajamas, or you're eating dinner, or you're, texting while you're listening to me, or whatever the reason is, uh, then don't turn your camera on, just turn your mic on, and we'll be able to hear you. So the brief statement I want to make is that in terms of the good and evil dynamic, the polarity between those two aspects. There, this is my experience, and also my belief. I have a lot of beliefs around this experience. There really is a realm of life, and again, what do we call these things? Because they're non-physical, non-time and space oriented, because they're eternal in nature as is spirit. So we don't really have words to talk about that. But there is a realm of life, or a realm of being, or a level of consciousness. Um, it's difficult to describe, but there is a state of life that is very spiritually high and very pure. Whether you call that heaven or you call it being with God, however we look at it, there is a spiritual state that is vibrationally so high that what one experiences when they enter that state is a state of constant connection and oneness with life, with all other souls. In that very elevated, sublime state, there's not such a thing, for example, as death or loss or illness or evil or anger, or all the things that we struggle with in our life in a body in the world aren't there. Just the beautiful aspects of spirit are there, wisdom and peace and joy and connection and love and all of that. There really is such an existence, a consciousness, a realm like that. And the good and evil that we're going to be talking about in this series do not exist there. That kind of duality of life and death, good and bad, light and dark, for and against, health and sickness, all those things, all the polarities that are part of our normal everyday consciousness as a human being don't exist there, which may be really hard to grasp, but they don't. However, in the vibrational realms beneath that, in the realms that I refer to as the time and space realms, because they're form realms or realms of matter. And all of those realms, all of them, not just this planet, but all of those realms are limited by time and space. They can only be in one space at one time. And they have a certain duration of time in which that form exists, and then it doesn't exist anymore. The house that I live in now 100 years ago wasn't here. Um, I don't know how long in the future, but at some point it won't be here again. And so on. The trees in my backyard, wasn't there at one point, now it is there. I wasn't here in this body at one point. Now I am. Someday I won't be. So all time space creation is limited. and spirit and spiritual creation is not. So they're different in that sense. But in all the time space realms, there is a continuum, a polarization, a duality of those realms. And part of that experience that we have in those realms is something called good and evil. And like I said, it is the nature of that is discussed in sacred religious, ancient scriptures around the world. Um, if you are in traditional churches these days, you'll probably still hear about that. You'll hear about God and Satan and Jesus. Um, if you're in non-traditional uh, spiritual organizations or movements of some kind, whether it's New Age or yoga or meditation or whatever else it might be, um, you probably aren't going to hear so much about the evil side. You're just going to hear about things that are self-help things, how to spiritually awaken, how to heal yourself, how to forgive, how to live a good life, how to manifest things that you want to have in your life. You'll hear things like that. Um, but and generally speaking, in the cultural scene, you don't hear a lot of people talking about evil in the real sense of that, not in the sense of, oh, somebody did a thing that wasn't nice, but I mean in the real sense of actual evil in the ancient understandings of those things. Modern people seem kind of like, I'm too sophisticated and cool and intelligent to believe in that stuff now, so I don't want to hear about it. Um, but in this series for a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about the nature of good and evil and see what we can learn about it that would be helpful to us in our lives, and more importantly, perhaps, if you're at all troubled by what's going on in the world, help you to find a way to um, feel like you're more successfully engaging that instead of just hiding from it or instead of just getting caught up in it. And so hopefully, that's my hope anyway, is that this series might help with that. So, so I'm going to stop talking for a moment and put a question out there that I hope somebody will respond to and with the group by turning on your camera and mic, or at least your mic. And so my question is right off the bat. So, would anybody like to share briefly what your what your understanding of good and evil is? Do you think it's nonsense? Do you think you've experienced some of both? Do you have an understanding of why that dynamic exists? Anything you want to share about your perspective or your understanding of the good and evil uh, nature. So there's no right and wrong answers. You're not going to be judged or graded on this, by the way. Yeah, yeah, James. Hi, welcome back, by the way. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, buddy.
Good. Actually, it was kind of interesting. I was listening to a YouTube channel about Edgar Casey
Yeah, yeah,
just a couple hours ago, and he was kind of mentioning something similar along those lines, saying something about people who are supposedly soulless.
yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't mean good or evil. It's just a different type of
Hmm.
being, and but it just kind of reminded me of that for me. And then one point he tried to make was that you really can't blame anyone who's so-called soulless as like being evil or anything. He said something that's just a soul making a poor choice
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
was something he said. So I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of goes into my beliefs that it's more of a personal thing. People, not everyone has agency in the complete sense that we think of it, but I think it does definitely is more of a personal issue,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it represents somewhat of a conscious choice.
Right, right. Yeah, that's okay. It's perfect. That's thank you. I don't want to cut you off if there's more.
Nope,
That's
that's it. I
that's
just
an important perspective I hope somebody would bring up tonight. So thank you for initiating, getting the ball rolling for us.
You're welcome. Yeah, it was interesting synchronicity with the universe today.
I love how that works. I really do.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Great to see you, James. Okay. So, Nahama and Shuli.
Do you have anything you want to say, or shall I just go ahead? Okay.
Hi, Shuli.
Um,
I can see just part of you. There you are. Hi, sweetie.
I'm don't worry, I'm here.
Hi, Nahama.
Hi. Um, this is an interesting one because I think about options. and I think about things people do when I start thinking about evil or bad or
Mhm.
poor decisions, that kind of thing. I don't think about individuals themselves.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
And it really, for me, from what I've seen and some of the things I've read, it has to do with where that choice is coming from.
Yeah.
And when it's very ego-centered,
Mhm,
and I want this, and I want that, and I need this, many times the decisions are bad and fall into that realm of evil
mhm,
because selfishly made.
mhm.
And when we sit back and rather than do what's best for us from that ego place, but do what's best for the world, which includes us,
Right,
then it tends to be good.
right, right.
Around you too. The good and bad inclinations.
That's good. Yeah, thank you. That's good. That's another one that there's so many facets to this, that which is why I'm going to do more than one night on it, or plan to anyway. But yeah, that's a significant one. I read years ago, which is uh, was um, serious, but also kind of tongue in cheek in a way. This person was writing and saying, basically, we have these two aspects. We have this soul essence of us, which is like the God essence or the good angel, and then we have this ego essence, which is like the devil essence or the bad essence in us. And it's sort of like those old cartoons with the good angel on one shoulder and the bad on the other one, and deciding which one you're going to listen to. Um, but which ties into, as you both know, the Kabbalistic idea of the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer HaTov, the good and bad inclinations that all of us struggle with. So we'll get to that in the series too, by the way. But I want to hear more from other people first. So thank you both. Anybody? Cindy, great. Go ahead.
Tell me if I'm right or wrong here. I just don't like giving evil any of my time to think about it.
Right, right.
Am I denying it or am I just, it's like, to me, it's just wasted space. But I don't necessarily know that I'm correct in my thoughts about it.
Yeah, that's a really good one. It opens up a really uh, so so my answer to that is that, hold on, my dog Rafi wants to get in on the conversation here. Hi, Raf. Um, so Rafi thinks life is good and everybody should be nice. That's his contribution. So um, the there's different ways of working with what you said. If what we do is we don't focus on evil, we don't get obsessed with it, we don't get scared of it, we don't let it occupy our consciousness, then from my perspective, that's a good thing, which is what I think you're talking about. I mean, knowing you, that's
Yeah.
what you do. But but there's another facet of that in which I would say something different. And that is when there is evil going on in the world that that we can have an impact on, then ignoring it or pretending it doesn't exist is a dangerous thing to do. And an example I'll give you is kind of a classic and very exaggerated example, but still the same principle. When Hitler was taking power in the 1930s in Germany, um, the at that point, most of the public did not realize the schemes he had in mind, which ended up in things like the Holocaust and efforts at world domination, and the SS force, which was literally worshiping Satan and doing satanic rituals to try to establish power for the Reich and so on. What resulted from that was really horrific. Some of the more intense, intentional, horrific evil that we've seen for a while. Some of that's coming back now, which I'll talk about in this series again too. And I don't mean Nazis, but But the policy at that time of England and the United States and some other allies was basically to just kind of ignore him. And when he did make demands, believe he would be faithful to his word, which he never was, and just believe if they appeased him, he would go away and it would get better. Appeasing evil doesn't ever work historically. And to ignore that kind of presence, or try to assuage it by appeasing it is historically a really serious mistake. So in that context, I think it's important not to ignore it and not to just leave it alone. Um, if somebody is, for just another lesser example, if somebody is embezzling money from your company, and you've worked hard to build the successful business, whatever it is, and somebody in your business is embezzling money from you, that's a bad thing to do to you. Now, it may not rise to the category of evil, maybe, or maybe it does, but it's certainly a bad thing to do to you and an immoral thing to do to you and an illegal thing to do. If they're doing that, they're going to do their best to present themselves as a nice guy to you and as reliable and trustworthy. And they're going to do their best to hide from you what their real intentions and actions are. And if you have a hunch about that, or some other employees kind of tell you, hey, I have this, I think maybe something screwy is going on here, and you choose to ignore that, you choose to ignore your gut feeling, you choose to ignore some suspicious behavior, and you choose to ignore some feedback from other employees who are questioning it too, that's not a good thing for your company. So I think in general, we have to sort of find this balance between being obsessed with and afraid of evil, either as an energy or as people doing things, or both. Being obsessed with that, I think, is very dangerous to our psyche. And I think ignoring evil actors who don't just make a mistake once and do something bad, they have an intentional, consistent pattern of doing this, and they want to inflict violence and terror and pain on people. Ignoring that is really dangerous. So, again, that's totally me. That's where I'm at with those things. In your case, Cindy, specifically, um, you you tend to see the best in people, overlook things where they're having failures or let you down or whatever, and try to keep encouraging the best in them, and don't focus on that other part, which is in that context really great, I think. And I think you do that probably better than me. I think you do that really well. So
Well, when troubles came my way on occasion, uh, you have to live on your morals and ethics.
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And the other thing that I think is important is we didn't rely on my income. So when you're talking about income for people and not standing up,
hmm
I think that's something that definitely holds people back
oh
from from living up to what they know is right.
yeah, me too. Me
And
too.
that would be difficult for me to do that.
Mhm.
My income wouldn't come first. If it was wrong, it was wrong, and I had to make it known. So,
Well, yeah, I've seen you do that on more than one occasion, even when it put you in a situation you didn't really want to be in. So
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
yeah. So everybody needs to keep that good space,
hmm
within them
hmm Yes, yes.
as much as they can, um, and live within your means so that if tragedy strikes, that you have to deal with, that you're able to do that and stand up and feel good about what you did.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's really good. Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
Let's see here. Anna, go ahead.
Well, what I think about for myself is in not acknowledging that people oftentimes have an intent to harm you or to take advantage of you.
Yes.
That's not something I would do. I have really had found myself in some business situations and some decisions where I really was taken advantage of because I didn't acknowledge
Right.
that there is, if you want to call it evil or malintent or whatever. So it's not like a tragedy or something bad to respond to. It's an acknowledgement
Mm.
that it's important for me not to be naive, that
Yes,
there
yes.
are other people that are out there that are certainly willing to take advantage of anyone or even to harm them. So that I don't want to focus on it and worry about it, but I really need to get out of my bubble that
Mhm.
everybody is fluffy and wonderful and their
Yes,
soul is good. And it's
yes,
like, okay, yes, that is true, but they may still be choosing to take advantage of me.
yes, yes. Yeah, that's a really good point. And um, on a if you expand that principle to like a national level, um, I've been thinking about Gandhi the last few days. I'm not sure why, but some incidents from his life and also a couple of scenes from the movie about his life. But Gandhi led probably the largest peace civil change movement ever, and um, and really it was a peaceful movement, and it challenged the entire British Empire at the time, which was still colonial. That was, and the success he had was tremendous, not without loss and suffering, but tremendous success. Um, but one of the things he said, as his campaign got further along and India got its independence and so on, um, when he was interviewed by the BBC, because Hitler had already had risen to power at that time, and people were talking to him about would your nonviolent tactics of civil disobedience and discourse have worked against the Nazi regime? And he said, absolutely not, which kind of stunned the reporter because he thought that that was Gandhi's approach to everything. And he said, um, my kind of nonviolent disobedience in order to right an injustice only works if you have a moral opponent, and they're not. And so that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying. If we're negotiating with somebody in good faith, that only works if they're negotiating in good faith. If they're all along really planning to slit our throats or steal all our money or whatever it is, steal our land or steal our cattle or imprison us or whatever the nefarious intention is, if that's really their heartfelt intention all along, and all the other things they're doing is just a ploy. You can't negotiate with them as if they have the same moral center as you do. Or you can, but it's going to be like Anna said, you're going to regret it in the end because you're not on the same ground to start with. Um, and that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to accept because so many of us want to believe that everybody's like us. And if you look deep enough, you can make a case for that. But you have to go really, 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 really deep because the fact is there are many people that aren't like you and me at all. And that's a very unpleasant reality of this world right now. Um, there, I, I knew a person, a police officer for years, and and he's retired now. And I asked him years ago what were the kind of primary changes he saw over the course of his time as an officer. And he said, well, I'll give you just one example. And he said, you'll think it's extreme, but it's kind of a typical example of what I've seen. He said back, and at the time we were talking, he would have been talking about probably this late 50s and 60s when he was an officer. When he did things in schools, he would be a school resource officer for a while. He said the kind of trouble I would break up or the kind of people that I would take down to the office were people who boys who had a little fist fight in the locker room, or kids who were chewing gum or stealing somebody's pencils in the classroom. And he said, now what I deal with is people shooting and stabbing each other because they want their shoes. And I think it's fine if the person won't give them the shoes that they want to just, take out your knife and cut them or shoot them. And he said it's a very different world now. So the reality that there are people out there like that is very troubling. And at the same time, for example, there are places, rightly or wrongly, there are places that if my wife were to go there by herself in the evening, I would feel comfortable with her doing that. There are other places, even in this town, which is not a horribly crime-ridden town, even in this town, there are places I absolutely would not want her to go after dark. Absolutely would not. And because I know enough to know that while she might be fine, the environment is not. It is not a safe environment. So when we get into this whole discussion, one of the factors that needs to be taken seriously is our ability to make discernments. And I don't mean by that holding prejudice against people we don't know and make assumptions about, but I do mean discerning energies that are present and discerning based on situational experiences of places that are okay to be and places that we literally will be in physical danger if we go there. So that's another unpleasant reality that here in this world we deal with. And so anyway, I'll be quiet again. Anybody else have some comments about your understanding of or experience with good and evil? So I'm going to talk about something now, unless oh, James, I just saw your camera come on. Did you have something else you'd like to add? Oh, okay, all right.
I'm kind of working on it, but yeah, give me a couple minutes.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Yeah. The one of the interesting things in the spiritual texts, and there are many examples in texts from all over different cultures, but the ones we're probably most familiar with are the Bible, those of us in this country, because we probably grew up on that or at least heard stories from it. The interesting thing that few people have talked about that I've heard is that there's this biblical narrative that there was a creation story at one point, and God created Adam and Eve, and then from them the rest of humanity. And he also created everything else, and he created this place called the Garden of Eden. And the Garden of Eden was this paradise. It's kind of the quintessential example of a paradise state. And in the garden, everything was hunky-dory. Animals didn't attack or eat people. Animals didn't attack or eat each other. Everything lived off of the food, which they didn't even have to cultivate. It just grew the vegetables and trees and herbs, and everything ate all that stuff. It was just freely provided. The temperature and climate were fine. The water was clean. Everything was like great. And according again to this narrative, Adam and Eve even saw and talked with God in the garden every day. So this was like a good place, you know. And then all of the problems biblically start after that when the so-called fall of man happens and they disobey God and they eat the forbidden fruit. Then they're cast out of the garden and now they experience this world of good and evil and travail and turmoil and trials and tribulations and all of that stuff that the rest of the whole Bible talks about and that we experience in our human lives. But what I don't hear people talk about is that in that perfect Garden of Eden, in this idyllic paradise, in the midst of that was the serpent. Adam and Eve did not create the serpent. And since God created everything in the garden, we have to assume in the narrative that God created that too. So here's this serpent in the garden. And it's through the serpent that they're tempted to do something that they were asked not to do. It's through the serpent that they are tempted and disobey what they were asked to do, and then suddenly have this knowledge they didn't have before, and it changes everything, and they lose their awareness of God, they lose their awareness of oneness, they start realizing they're separate, they're realizing they're naked, they become afraid of animals, and everything goes downhill from there. So what I'm getting at is in all of the sacred stories, at some point, there's a recognition that prior to human existence, good and evil already existed, that there's a cosmic aspect to good and evil. And we almost never talk about that, at least in the circles that I move in. I think it's too uncomfortable, or people think, oh, you're now this fundamentalist Christian person that thinks it's, all God and Satan and all heaven and hell, and you don't believe in Jesus. And so they kind of categorize your thinking. You must think that way if you actually believe in some kind of cosmic good and evil. Um, even Hindus and Buddhists and very non-Christian people also have a concept of cosmic good and evil, and Norse mythology, Roman mythology, Greek mythology, they all do. So all of them that I've read anyway, but which is a lot. And so there's another component to that. And does that, if that's true, does this cosmic good and evil force, how does that infringe on our world if it does? And how does that affect us if it does? And so that's a whole other realm of understanding in relation to that topic. But I'm going to pause again in case James has got something he wants to share with us.
Yeah, sorry. Normally I don't talk, but this is kind of like one of my pet projects.
No, I love it when you talk. You always say
Yeah,
good stuff.
yeah. No, I just don't like to talk too much. I have a degree in history, so I'm always looking at morality and trying to conform that with what I know.
Right.
I think part of this is, especially in the times we live in, is what is evil?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not acts.
Mm-hmm.
And like in the law, there's a concept of mens rea, and it's
Right.
criminal intent.
Right.
And I think that's part of it, because for us, especially in my generation being Gen X, we grew up reading about World War II, and the Germans did all these bad things. They bombed London, they bombed Coventry and everything. And we bombed Dresden. We destroyed Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same,
Act.
it's the same, it's the same thing going on. It's just who's doing it, And then there was an old skit from England. So are we the baddies?
Right.
You
Right.
Yeah, and for me, it's like, that's the thing I really struggle with, and I go all the way back to ancient Persia with Zoroastrianism,
Mm-hmm.
going back to like 550 BC,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking, this is something humans have been struggling with for at least 2,500, 33,000 years.
Exactly.
And so I guess that's my question. What is evil?
Yeah.
Is it
That's
people
it.
based, or is it action based, or what?
Yeah. Right. I'm jotting that down. It's a great question. So yeah, and obviously I don't have the answer to that, but so my because I've thought a lot about that too. But my thoughts around that are that it does fall into three primary categories from the way I look at it. The first one is people have free choice and they can make some really bad choices that have terrible consequences without intention. So that's category number one. A horrible result of an action, but the intention was not to create that horrible result. Somebody can have a few drinks because they're having a tough time and they're struggling with something, and then they get behind the wheel because they're stupid and they're not thinking, and they end up having an accident and killing somebody. That's horrible. Not what they intended. They weren't even drinking to hurt anybody. They were trying to drink to assuage their own struggle, and they ended up with something horrible. So there's something that's a horrible action, but without an intent. Versus somebody who gets behind the wheel of their car, is mad at their ex and runs over them with the intent to kill them. So in both cases, a horrible result using the same vehicle, but a very different intent. So that's a second category, which is worse because that was intentional. And the law as you said, the law treats these things differently as well. Or somebody breaks into your house and is trying to kill your wife, and you end up clubbing, stabbing, whatever. You stop the person, but in stopping them, you end up killing them. The law is going to treat that very differently than if you just go out with a gun and you're mad at somebody and blow their brains out. They're both dead from a weapon, but totally different scenarios and different intents and different consequences. I think those are two different ones, intentional and unintentional. And then I think there is, and this is me, but I think there is a a cosmic force that's not human that can influence human choice. Just as there's a divine essence, if you will, or spiritual essence that can influence human choice. And those influencers are to do good things, to be kind, to be forgiving, to be patient, to, try to make the world a better place. All those things, those kind of divine inspirations, if you will, or good inspirations versus the ones that inspire us. The best example I have of that, and then I'll quit talking again, let somebody else. But if you're in a drug culture, for example, an addict culture, and you stop using or are trying to stop using, and you stay with those same people, it's going to be really, really, really hard because all of those people are going to see you're improving as a threat to them, and they're going to want you to keep using. Or even smokers, and to take it out of the drug realm, oh, just have one, or or do something that they know will trigger you to smoke because they want the company. And so as human beings, we try to influence people to think like us and act like us. Well, cosmically, if there is, which I think there is, but if there is cosmically this good and evil energy, for lack of a better word, that interplays with human consciousness, and the more we hold on to an energy of anger or hatred, I don't mean just experience that in passing, but the more we nurture it and feed it, pretty soon we're going to start acting out that stuff. And if we act that out, and especially if we get away with it, or we get some kind of kudos from it from somebody else in a kind of a dark space, or we get notoriety, or we get a sense of power, or whatever we get from it, we're going to do more of that. And the more we feed that, the more we're going to do of it. And pretty soon you have people killing babies and slaughtering innocents and, raping people and doing stuff and I don't just mean once in an agitated or drug-addled state, but I mean, that's their chronic their way of living. Yeah. And then you even get groups that do that. So to me, there's the kind of an energetic influence that's not human. And then there's both good and bad. And then there's the personal choice with intention. And then the personal choice that's just a poor choice that unintentionally causes problems. I don't really call that last one evil because there was not an intent. But my definition of evil, part of that, how do I want to put this? If I have to go back to somebody trying to hurt your wife or child or something, if I have to use violence to stop somebody from hurting an innocent, I will use it. But I will. But thank God I haven't had to. But I would not like doing that. There are people that do like doing it. They do like hurting other people. And that's very different than me. So I think when you have that sort of intent, I think that really falls in my category of what evil is. Back to Shuli and Hama.
Yes. The things I found myself asking me as this discussion's going on is, what is a clue or what points out to me what my actions are? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they? And it's how I feel inside towards something. Anything that feeds the ego, I have to be a little suspicious of.
Yeah.
If I start, look at me, or whatever, those kinds of things. And they don't have to be trying to kill someone. It could just be, did you see what I just said to her? And,
Yes, exactly.
It can be very minor things. And then if you take an action, or just, sometimes I'll just smile. We'll leave a store and we'll have held the door for someone and had a few words or something with them. We don't even know them, but make a new friend.
Yep.
whatever, just doing a thoughtful thing. And just the peace that comes,
Mhm.
it's bigger than me. It's not coming from the ego. It's like that kindness,
Yeah.
me, not just another. And to me, those are not personal things that could very well be indicators of what you were talking
Yeah.
about,
Yes. Really, really helpful point. Yes, thank you. I like that. I appreciate that very much. That ties into something else that when Jesus was alive in the in the in the Gospel of Matthew, there's a section called the Sermon on the Mount. Excuse me. And in part of that section, he's quoting the laws of Moses and then making a further comment on them. And he'll say things like, "It's written, you shall not commit murder." And he says, "But I say to you, don't hold anger and hatred in your heart." So he's talking about so that inner aspect again. It's a good thing to not actually physically commit the act of killing somebody, but but there's a I think he was trying to get people to recognize, if we nurture, as James and I were just kind of talking about, if we nurture that anger and hatred in us towards somebody, sooner or later it's going to come out in some kind of action. And so we don't want to just refrain from choking somebody to death who we're mad at. We want to eventually work with purging that anger and or hatred out of us, so we don't have to deal with that. Um, and the same, and he gave lots of examples. It's written, don't commit adultery, but I say don't hold lust in your heart. All those kind of things of pointing at a deeper us, looking like you were just talking about. How are we really feeling and responding inside? What's going on at those deep levels in us? And that's really where for me at least, that's where the battle is for me of well, one more example. Like I can look at things going on in the world and find lots of fault. I can find people that I really am upset with, and people I really wish weren't doing what they're doing, and people I can point fingers and say, well, see, look what they're doing, but and really what they're doing is not good. But when I do this, how often do I stop and look at me and go, and what is it that I'm doing to people in my life right now? And where are those things in me? They may be lesser in degree, but there's still things that I need to work on. And I, like when Jesus was around, back to that same story, the Jews, the entire nation was occupied by Rome, which was not only a foreign military power, but a very hostile and cruel one. And the people hated the Romans. They hated the high priests because they were put in power, and not the legitimate high priests, but the ones that they put in power during that time were appointed by Rome. And the Romans even held all the vestments, the high priest's vestments and breastplate and all of that. They couldn't even have access to it without permission from Pilate. Um, so people hated the Romans. They hated the tax collectors because they cooperated with the Romans. They hated Herod because he cooperated with the Romans. And they really hated these people. And when Jesus came along, he was saying, look at these terrible people. And he never said, oh, you know what? These are really nice guys. No, you're all wrong. These guys are great people. He never said that. But what he did say is, yes, and how are you treating each other? How do you feel about your brother that you're mad at? How do you feel about this person that you just cheated on your business deal? Let's start right here. Let's look at what's going on in your heart first. And then later we can talk about the bigger picture of things. And
Stephen, have you heard the thing where if you point a finger at someone,
oh, yes.
there are three pointing back at
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You imagine it and it's like, oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, wagging my finger at you for always not singing.
There's three going back at you from your
Nope, not in that way.
hush.
Shirley likes pointing fingers at me, so it's okay. We'll just
Don't worry, I do so much
we'll,
everyone.
just pretend that when she wags her finger at me, these three point at her and go right back to me again.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Oh, back to Anna. Thank you both. I appreciate it. Anna, go ahead.
I think think we can overdo the projection that what we see in others is just us.
Mm.
I think we get back to discernment again,
Yes, exactly.
where we are, if we are doing things like Nahama is saying, and treating others well and being well, we're creating a certain energy in ourselves.
Hmm.
So that when we're around people that aren't like that, we, I think, will get to the place or can get to the place where we discern that that's not someone we want to be around.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure that, they always talk about what you see in others is what is in yourself. And
Mm.
I'm not sure that's true all the time. I'm really not.
Yeah.
Because
If it
sometimes
helped, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
because sometimes you're just seeing something that is there,
Hmm.
that is real, and then you talk yourself out of it.
Yes.
And then that becomes the problem because even in the, if I look back at instances where I feel that I've been involved with people that, were not very scrupulous, I believe that I was given a sense initially that I ignored. And
Yes.
to me, what I feel like some of my lesson is just really being firm in myself and discerning and following that guidance that I'm getting because we're told that over and over again that God is always with us. We're always guided, we're always have the answer. We just somehow don't always believe it, or I don't always believe it,
Yeah.
don't always follow through. So
Yeah,
I
I
just
agree.
put that in.
I agree. That's a good point. I appreciate you bringing it up. There are some things that that are popular now that are in a lot of contemporary spiritual teachings. That's one of them. That what you can't see something in somebody else that isn't in you. I've heard that in many different places from many different teachers.
Right.
Um, there's also a teaching that I've heard in numerous places that whatever you put out is what you get back. So if you're
Mhm.
putting out positive, only positive things will happen to you. I've heard that teaching. I've heard lots of teachings, and um, those two in particular, the nothing negative can happen to you if you're always, looking at things positively, is just, in my life experience, flat out false. And now, does it improve? Does having a positive attitude improve the quality of our lives? Absolutely. Does it help to create an environment in which we can experience and welcome and draw more of those things to us? Of course it does. Does it act as an absolute shield? Where no, it absolutely does not. And the other one is, you know, I really I know this will upset some people, but again, this is just me talking, and what do I know? But I will tell you flat out, I don't have any question about that. I absolutely, I
Yeah.
absolutely can see things in people that are not in me. I absolutely can do that. The there are things that I have witnessed people do either in person or on video that absolutely are not in me to do. They are not. And so that is one of those, again, philosophies that tries to make us feel good and warm and fuzzy about everything, and it just isn't real. The Now, in general, because most of us don't live lives of extreme and come into extreme violence or extreme saintliness, most of us don't have those experiences. Then in general, it's kind of true. I mean, if you see somebody getting angry, well, I can relate to that. I get angry. Or you see somebody who gets really impatient, well, I get impatient. Yeah, of course, of course. But if we're talking really as a principle of things, we have been given the gift of discernment, and that means the ability to make distinctions. And there are distinctions to be made. There are things that people would willingly do that I absolutely would not do. And so, um, and I can see those things in them. So, it's there's a lot of good teachings out there, and there's some that I think are misleading. For me, that's one that's misleading. But I just saw Eunice pop up, and it's time to end. So it's almost time to end. So go ahead, dear. We're right at the end again. Oops, you're muted. You're muted, Eunice. No, we can't hear you. Still muted. Uh,
There.
there you go. Now I gotcha.
Okay. One quick aside. It's great to see Allison's name up there.
I
Welcome.
know. For those of you who don't know Allison, Allison is a dear and old friend of ours from the Grand Rapids area. And but too many years ago to think about, we all hung out.
Was not nice to call her old.
Oh, a long time, a long time dear friend of ours.
Yeah, long time is better than old. I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible.
Sorry, Allison. And-
She's never going to show up again now. We've
That's right.
humiliated her.
Be all my fault. I know.
Oh, that's not true.
But anyway, yeah, Allison is a
Okay,
very,
not to the serious part.
yeah,
Um, it might not be comfortable for a lot of people to think about or talk about the concept of evil,
mhm,
but somewhere on your path, when you're really ready for it,
mhm,
you will have to deal with it.
mhm, mhm.
You will have to confront it as a pretty concrete thing.
Yeah.
And I guess, that's just an important thing, I think, to know is
Mhm.
it's there and it's one of the steps along the way.
It is. Yeah, it is for sure. And it's something again that's not really taught or talked about much. The good part about the fact that it's not talked about much is that people don't get overly fixated on it and dwell on it and get terrified. The bad part about the fact that it's not really taught is that when you actually encounter it, especially the cosmic element of it, it's you you will be blindsided if you don't know anything about that. And it's that's not an easy experience to go through. Um, the and again, the sacred literature around the world has those kind of encounter. I mean, Jesus decides to start this, messianic ministry to help the world and to draw people closer to God and to help reconcile people and all of that. And it decides to do this holy ministry. And the very, very first thing that happens to him is he has to deal with Satan for 40 days all by himself in the wilderness. It's not what you would think would be the first thing that would happen when you commit to a ministry like that. Um, and Buddha encounters Mara, the goddess of evil in the Buddhist tradition, before he attains his liberation. So there is a component of facing the duality in the lower creation and not being trapped by it. That's part of the liberation process is not no longer being subservient to fear to the point that it will stop you from doing something you need to do. So yeah, thank
So
you.
it's a thing to throw out, but
No,
it
that's
kind of just helps justify, your teaching sessions on it.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And again, the last thing, I'll say, and then we'll wrap up, is that in the series we'll explore, a lot of different avenues we've talked about tonight, probably some we haven't gotten to yet tonight. The one of the things that I feel is important is that there is, from my perspective, we're in a phase of the world right now where there is a tremendous influx of spirit into the world, a tremendous influx of it, of whatever you want to call it, spirit or spiritual energy or whatever you want to call it, a very high and powerful spiritual influx coming into the world right now. And there's a very, very strong evil, demonic, whatever term you want to use, also influx in the world right now that are behind a lot of the huge ideological clashes that are going on. And most there's a component to those that I think isn't being recognized. And it's kind of like not recognizing where Hitler was going. There's aspects I think it's important to pay attention to and to be aware of what's going on in the world in that regard. The other thing is that um, well, we'll get into this more in future series, but part of the answer to all of that is that we don't, the more we allow ourselves, our consciousness, our temple, if you will, the more we're willing to hold dark, egotistical, mean, selfish energies within us, even though they're just human at that point. Um, it's important that we not hold on to them and that we learn how to transform them or at least release them, because all of that energy is like a seed that actually will bring something forth that's much worse than where we started. So it's important to keep refocusing on loving kindness and keep refocusing on the divine and inspiring other people to do that, even when they're in hard times. So it's a it's a as what's the ancient Chinese blessing and curse all in one? May you live in interesting times. You know, well, we certainly live in interesting times, and we're going to have we are having the opportunity to really spiritually awaken and to really bring forth who we are spiritually, bring that forth into the world through whatever we do and however we live. It's more important, I think, than it's been in quite a while that people who are in touch with that within themselves give voice to it and give expression to it in their lives. I think it's not a time to hold your light under a bushel, so to speak. So anyway, thank you all so much for sharing tonight. I really, really, really appreciate it. We'll do more in the next couple of weeks and look at some other aspects of this, including the good side too, not just the evil side, where that comes from and what that is and how that works in the world. But anyway, thank you all for contributing and being here tonight. And I look forward to getting together with you again. For those of you who are coming tomorrow, we're having one of our 1-by-1 events at Emily and Greg's home tomorrow. One of our gatherings, which is the potluck and a discussion group. So some of you I'll be seeing there tomorrow, which would be great. And
I would like to mention that we are not full, and as long as you would let us know in advance, like send Stephen a message, text message on a cell phone or something.
but you would need to know that tonight, is that right?
Yes, so I can let Emily know tomorrow.
As it turns out, I was kind of stupid. Johnny Appleseed Festival is an annual thing that occurs here. It's a really big thing, and many people in our spiritual community go there to participate in it. And or Unity Church here has a booth there as well. It's a big fundraiser for them. So a number of people go to volunteer and help run their booth throughout the weekend as well. And had I realized that was this weekend, I wouldn't have scheduled our event then. But so we have some openings. So you're welcome to come if you can get a hold of text.
Yeah. So both James and Hama and Shuli had to take off. So
Yes, right.
Okay, doke.
Love you
All
all.
right,
Thank
that's
you
all.
so much.
See ya.
All righty. Have a great week, everyone. Love you. Hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, Allison.